In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
Il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di comunione e liberazione.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il programma Easy Token Collection, per accumulare punti da trasformare in premi. Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
Il Papa Leon XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di comunione e liberazione.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il programma Easy Token Collection, per accumulare punti da trasformare in premi. Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to this encounter. Which has been put together by the editors of Tracce, the international magazine of communal liberation, who are in Pavilion A3, have got a whole arena where many dialogues and encounters are happening through the whole week. Today's dialogue, nothing to say about it. It comes under the pressure, the emotion, being moved from everything that we saw happen yesterday, which is the visit of Pope Leo XIV. It was amazing to be able to see, hear, and on many, including especially the little ones, touch this visible sign which Christ has chosen to ensure 2,000 years after his resurrection, his ascension, to ensure his historical presence in the world so that we can reach it too. A story that's generated a people which Don Giussani said is guided as a guarantee of a living person, but by a living person, the Bishop of Rome. And yesterday we saw that clearly, how much life there was on the face, on the gestures, on the actions, the words of the Pope. Great. So this story, which started many years ago, has reached the beginning of the 1900s. A young man, a youngster in the seminary of Venegono as a high school student. This was Giussani, who described like this the revolution which had intervened in his existence, thanks to the encounter with a professor of his. The greatness of the Christian faith, without any comparison with any other position, is this. Christ has responded to man's question, and so we have a common destiny. Who accepts the faith and lives it, and who, not having faith, drowns in the question, despairs within the question, suffers in that question. And so many here today, in these days at the meeting, are here because they were reached by the announcement of that discovery. And back in the day, when Don Julian Caron asked me to dedicate myself to writing his biography, then I had to immerse myself in an enormous quantity of data and facts about the life of Giussani. I was the conviction that I thought I knew him pretty well. And then a few years later, Davide Prosperi asked me to pick this up again all that material that I had to think about new publications, because he said to me in an audience that Pope Francis had said to him that Giussani by now is the inheritance of the Church, so you need to make him known. And you can't imagine how many discoveries with respect to the ideas that I had of already thinking I knew everything about him. I'll just tell you a couple of 2 or 3 things briefly, because I don't want to steal too much time from our guests. The first one is the passion that Don Giussani had for humanity, for his humanity. Already as a young priest, he wrote, "I don't want to live uselessly. This is my obsession." But second, following along to this could just be the cry of a great man, the enthusiasm for Christ. Which had made him discover that without this encounter, his life would have been nothing. He would have been able to do nothing. And so what does he say one day? The last thought was that the next week you could live once again, that we might still be again. So much so was another one was for him the protagonist. What Pope Leo, after the nth applause, he said that we should applaud Christ, not him, the Pope. And he said, Giussani, we're born with this. I wouldn't say this realistic sense of our smallness. So another was so much more for his life. And in the end, finally, the direct consequence of this passion, this enthusiasm for humanity and for Christ, for his humanity, the anxiousness to make Christ be known. It's for many years, he said, that I no longer cry for 2 reasons. The unhappiness and the eternal unhappiness of my brother men, their terrestrial unhappiness. It's the sign of that eternal one. Jesus has helped us to cry out in the world about his love and the happiness of men, the great and unnarratable happiness that awaits us. Good. You could say, this was Don Giussani. This is what he lived. But Don Giussani isn't around anymore. And now, today, 21 years after his death, what can we say about the gift which has been for many in the past years? Is it still there? And so we sort of invented this moment, asking 2 persons who have some right to talk, to suggest through their lives, their experiences, if and in what terms Don Giussani is a gift, still a gift for the present. And first of all, Monsignor Apeciti, who's the responsible person at the Archdiocese of Milan for the cause of saints, and therefore, above all for us, since 2012 he's been looking after the diocesan phase of the cause of beatification and canonization of Don Giussani. And now there can be some applause, because you can't imagine what sacrifices and efforts were required by him to immerse himself in a huge pile. It took a lorry load, literally, that after the case, the diocesan phase, after that was closed, this whole load reached the Congregation for the Cause of Saints in Rome. So now the Roman phase of the process goes, and I hope we really must thank him. And Davide, I don't need to introduce him really. He's the president of the Fraternity of the Communal Liberation. He was nominated in November 2021. By the end of that, after Don Julian Caron retired, and he is measuring himself, was measured and I hope subjectively that he continues to do it for the rest of his days, with against the promise, the inheritance that Don Giussani has left us, not as a museum of memories, of recollections, but as Pope Francis said, a fire there. I've finished my presentation. Today you're not at a conference. First question to Don Ennio. I don't know who among present people know how you got to know Don Giussani, how you came to know him, and what impression the encounter with him had made on you. Firstly, I obey because you said that you've made many people applaud for me. So I met a wonderful lady, the postulator, Chiara. So she's the one who deserves all this applause. I'd say this because it's so much that it's because with her in these 12 years, we worked, we compared ourselves, her knowledge, our knowledge of these brought this fruit, which now we entrust to the Church, the Holy Father. And now I'll answer the question. How many people asked me, I don't how to respond except this. Giussani, a bit. I knew him in. He was a name that circulated in the seminary, but those who appreciated him, who criticised him. But for me, it was fundamental. Alberto knows that when I had the fortune from Providence to do two other processes of beatification, that of Paul VI in the Milanese phase, and that of Giovanni Lazzati, the rector of Cattolica. I went the first time. I went to Don Giussani. He was one of the witnesses that I'd been asked to talk to, and I was a bit shy. He felt himself a small piece of clay like me, and so some other meetings I'd heard from another testimony that when you start to do the interrogations, we called him, he said, here's the inquisitor of the Church who wants to find the guilty and wants to find the saint. So I'm just here to speak to me of the sanctity of this person. You're an inquisitor, said this guy, and it wasn't a very happy dialogue. This has nothing to do with Giussani, because the thing that I struck straight away was his eyes, his smile, and his voice. I was a bit concerned, having also had these other experiences. But his eyes, I believe that only those who've seen him could see what crystalline, penetrating eyes he had. Eyes that penetrated you, but not as an inquisition. They entered into you, but they communicated to me so much serenity, joy. He appreciates you. He loves you through those eyes. And so the dialogue was straight away made between faces, and then his smile. And so I don't see him looking at the mirror, but his smile that was so welcoming, that his greeting, so benevolent, that transmitted to me the fact that already from that first moment he esteemed me, he cared for me, he welcomed me. But we didn't know each other, but he appreciated me because I was a priest, because I was a brother of his, because I was a man like him. And we sought together what was true. And so this dialogue on these things went on. But in speaking and listening, he was a convinced man. Everything that he said, it wasn't, and it's often to say, you've heard of things, and you say things a bit according to the schemes, but this man spoke with his heart, and he spoke with esteem for everyone. He spoke of Paul VI, obviously, and didn't recall the particular phrases that people said, but he went ahead. So the encouragement that he had, that was a sustained support for him. He spoke with the heart of a son who's moved. And careful not to say too much, not to talk too long. This second encounter that I had a few years later for the other cause, there was a bit more serene, obviously, but the second time, he still had this way to look at you with his eyes full of joy, which was communicated to you. I was a bit more worried because Lazzati was the representative at Azione Cattolica, and I could think that there might be been some tension between them, but he spoke to me with an exceptional esteem of Lazzati, appreciating very much for his qualities. And there I understood that if we want to, communal liberation wasn't a break with the past, it was a maturation of the past. On the church walk goes ahead not by revolution but by innovation. It's something that renews itself always. So this esteem consoled me, because also one evening when we met, one of us said his opinions, and it was always seeking a dialogue which Giussani sought, despite all the differences, knowing our differences, and then he'd offer to take Lazzati home in his car one evening, and so how do they say when they said goodbye after taking home, and this was saying goodbye like a friend. He was a great man because he was convinced of what he did. And so it's important to be convinced of what we do for the Lord. So he even said, when he got in the car, I thought that deep down that man had given all his life to Christ. So he can represent him too. So these two moments, and then the third moment was this splendid adventure of this process, what's technically known as a trial, but it's the discovery of a man deep in his heart. Thank you. Davide, Don Giussani spoke of the beautiful day of an encounter with his professor, which had revolutionized his life. And you? Can you tell us about your beautiful day of your encounter with Giussani?
Yes, so I've already told it many times in other contexts, not in this context, so I'll try anyways to answer your question. My beautiful day is in the sense that Giussani says was in December of 1994 during the spiritual exercises of the university students, known as the title of these exercises, Recognizing Christ, and the title of these exercises was the thing that in that moment kind of was turning in my head as a question that wasn't simply just how the rite was happening, but a question that I wanted to really understand how the word Christ related to me. And so Don Giussani, as we can see today in the video that we'll show, started with a phrase by Kafka which said, "There is a point of arrival but no way to get there." So this really kind of struck me because it was exactly my problem. I knew that I was living for something bigger than me. I knew that I desired that my life wouldn't be thrown away. So it wasn't an obsession yet, but yeah, as it was for Giussani, but the sentiment was there. And so it wasn't just defined by time that passed, but it kind of ate away at me slowly. So the problem was just that, where is the way? Is there a way? And so I'll just give a flash of a moment for you to understand how dramatic the thing was for me. So I lost my dad when I was 6 years old, and this thing really, I don't want to kind of get into the psychological elements, but for whoever, the presence of a father is a fundamental presence, a biological father or father in the sense of an educational way, because a child needs and learns from the presence of a father, from an adult presence, that explains things. So the father is really the person who introduces you positively to reality. And for me, this was lacking. I felt a young man who felt the need of a certainty, but profoundly insecure. And so what this Giussani, to answer to this question that he himself had asked himself, he started to read the first page of the Gospel of St. John, when John describes the first encounter of John and Andrew with Jesus. And when I think about it again, I get goosebumps, kind of, because I still remember the experience that I was passing in that moment was like as if I was projected there in the middle of the scene, not as someone who watching a film, but as an actor in the movie. And so immediately my perception, I was 20, so my perception that I had of that moment was that he was present, because effectively for him he was the thing that the gospel described was a present fact, a present experience. And so I remember that he told about what Andrew said to his wife when he came back home. His wife saw him differently, in a different way, and the questions I asked myself weren't how does he know? It's not written in the gospel. But for me in that moment, it seemed that it couldn't have gone differently, other than the way Giussani told it. So within me, this question grew, which wasn't theoretical. It was a burning question. How can someone talk like this in the present of a thing that happened 2,000 years ago? And evidently the answer was in front of my eyes, because he was like that, because for him it wasn't a memory, it was an experience in the present. And so then at a certain point, it was a moment passing from the gospel story to facts of the contemporary facts of the present day. He read a letter that I still keep. Now it's been republished, but I've always kept it in my suitcase, because I'm not a person a very sentimental person, but I did cry in that moment when he read the letter of this young man who was dying of AIDS, and 2 days after he'd written to him, he died. At the time, AIDS was a disease that brought with itself kind of a tragedy, a human tragedy, because other than the physical pain, other than the imminence of death, it also brought the sign of a disorder, of the gaze of others as remarking your immorality. And so this young man never knew personally Don Giussani, but through one of the other guys, the students who were with Don Giussani who did university like me, he met Don Giussani through these people and these books, especially the religious sense. And I remember that there were one of the phrases, this letter is a beautiful letter that I recommend to anyone to read. But at a certain point it says, even if it was an illusion, this thing is too human and too reasonable not to be true. And this encounter had literally changed the life of this young man a moment before his encounter with Christ in death. And like the good thief. And so let's say that day, even if Giussani appeared to me as a figure, an unreachable figure, he was in part, that's true. But I felt him suddenly as very close to me, very reachable, very I desired to have a relationship with him, a personal relationship. And so the following year, I remember the day very well. It was the 6th of October of 1995, when at Bassano del Grappa he received the prize for the Catholic culture. It was also the day of my birthday. And me and my brother, we were there, two students, and we went with a friend. We went to this moment. Before the encounter, there was in a room there in Bassano, there was a buffet organized for Don Giussani with around 20 people inside. And for misunderstanding, me and my brother kind of went into the room. We were dressed really badly. Everyone was obviously very elegant, invited, and like Don Pino said, personally, they'd been invited with a personal autograph by Don Giussani. And in that moment, I really desperately tried to leave, but my brother, at a certain point, I can tell this episode, that there was kind of horseshoe shape around Don Giussani. My brother, to try and listen to what they were saying, he grasped onto two guys that were in this, I don't remember who they were, in this horseshoe shape around Don Giussani. And seeing this scene, I went to reach to drag him away, but he really grasped onto the neck of this guy, and he created a chain that ruinously produced a kind of mess. And Giussani turned around, and seeing the culprit of this scene, but he recognized him. Paolo, my brother, had already begun to talk to him for personal reasons, and I understood there was nothing to do. And so I tried to escape. I reached the door, and Cesana appears there, and he asked me, "What are you doing here?" And I didn't know either. So the moral of the story, all this mess. But at the end, Giussani, it was the occasion to get to know him, because after this, later he invited us for a lunch, and from there, a relationship, a personal relationship, a real friendship started with him, on a friendship on another scale. And for me, he was really a father figure. And for this reason, I struggle to identify one beautiful day, because the best day was when I discovered the road, the pathway was there. But the other best moment was when I realized life was there.
From the opening of the cause and of Don Giussani, you, Don Ennio, you sort of immersed yourself in this reading, first of the texts of Don Giussani, the published ones, and then the unpublished ones, and then you dug in the archives. You spoke with many witnesses and heard from them. So from all this huge, massive data, if you could say in few words, it's a tricky task that I'm sure you can handle, what are the original traits, the most significant ones that emerged from the charism of Don Giussani that you heard as a gift for the present? I'll try with a phrase which I always already liked yesterday. The Pope said, speaking of Paul VI, who I love very much, when he said in the closing of the 1975 Holy Year, the civilization of love will prevail. For me, this is a very brief phrase, very rich phrase. Giussani had this conviction, and he lived it. The civilization of love, which is that of Christ, that will prevail. There'll be trouble in society, etc. When the Pope said this, we were still in the midst of the Vietnam War, etc. And Giussani said we don't have to be afraid, because beyond every intention, every historical reading, that the civilization of love will prevail, because it's the love of God which guides the history of man. So this is the first phrase that I think say, what did he seem to me, what seems most relevant. And so then consequences come from that. But enthusiasm, we've said this a bit, this man, you can read it very well in his writings, in these interviews, etc. He was enthusiastic. He communicated enthusiasm, communicated this conviction that it was worth, as you say, things were worthwhile. So in this world, in this situation, without spending time moaning and complaining and crying, listing all the terrible things that aren't good. The famous phrase is "my times." So he never said this. We need to have this trust, this enthusiasm in the future and in the present now, because the future is us. We're not there yet. It's the present that will make the future. So he was always convinced and courageously. Third one I would say is his capacity to dialogue with this trust, not only, as we say many times, with the famous discourses that you had with on the trains with the young people who were a bit indifferent, but also the choice to go into Bochet and teach, not being afraid of the young people, to go and meet them, whatever their position, their refusals. It's nice to when we read that, like, many young people got into there who'd been grown up in a society, a culture that was very liberal or indifferent, and straight away, immediately they sort of despised him from that, and they were sort of agnostic, indifferent, but they came out as believers, because that priest, who was a bit bizarre, still dressed back in those days in his cassock, and in those times then it wasn't modern. But he communicated something, the courage of answering their questions, their objections, of taking them up, and even their irreverence. So the capacity for dialogue, which requires trust in the other, the esteem, nevertheless, of that person. These are things that I found in the letters. When I had to read his letters, many letters from young people who say, that thing that you said to me, and many times that thing that you said during the meeting, that thing struck me. And then when I got up to and spoke to you, so there's often this constant willingness to listen to everybody in a little room a bit improvised, but to listen to everybody, to give value to everybody, valuing everyone. And so there, I think, from my experience in the process, I think one of the things that struck me is that one witness comes who said, but I was Don Giussani's favourite, and I was a bit surprised because in these days that word is a bit dangerous, and so I kept a kind of poker face, and then another witness came forth and said, I was Don Giussani's favourite one. Worse still, it's from this lady. now it's a bit of a crisis. But then fortunately, a third one comes along and says, "Oh, I was Don Giussani's favourite," and so okay. Now, fortunately, other things emerged because you saw that. I can explain it. That the relationship that he had with me was that, like the Lord has with his disciples, with the beloved disciple. There's never a name on that. We're the ones who say it's John, but in the gospel it doesn't say that. There's the beloved gospel disciple and the one who loved him. So these witnesses had the same style as the God of Israel. The people of Israel were the beloved one of God, but not because they were privileged, but because God communicated. He made them know the great love that he had for mankind, for human beings, because the people of Israel, so they could communicate this to everybody, to say how much the passionate love of God is for humanity. So this way the beloved disciple of Jesus was that to whom Jesus communicated as how Jesus loves. So the Lord who loves totally. So the beloved disciple, whoever it could be, he knows that like this you must love as you've been loved. And so he said, I understood that the attention that he had, the amount of time that he had for everybody, and the attention that Giussani gave me, the importance that I had for him, not his work. I wasn't a professional, but important for him because in me he saw Christ, and he wanted to communicate the same passion for Christ that he had that moved him to dedicate himself to everyone. And he wanted that I should be convinced that what made them true, what that changed them, was knowing that we're loved concretely, truly, in such a way that then I could become a witness of love. One who announces, who communicates what they've discovered. As Davide said, having discovered that not only this priest loves you, but this priest loves you, he values you, he esteems you, because like this, like this my Lord will do it with you. So I love you because he loves me. It's like a cascade of love. Giussani felt himself loved immensely, totally. And like this, he understood that his life as a priest was made to be able to communicate to everyone. There's nothing greater than knowing that you are totally loved, intensely by God. This was his dream. This what I think the thing that makes him relevant today, knowing that we're loved in a society in which maybe love is a bit confused or forgotten. Thank you. And Davide, to stay on a similar question, for the role that you've got, you are often in constant reports with people and communities from CL who are all around the world by now, more 40 nations. What maybe traits of the figure, the charism, we can say it still once again, of Giussani emerge in what I imagine in many times, and we see it in Traces on this website, in this various different ways. What traits emerge to your eyes that's most significant? Is there some fact, some encounter you've made that has made this show up more clearly to your eyes?
And yeah, so like there's lots of facts. So I'll just do a few examples to not stay here too long, because why there's so many moments, because every experience, every situation in which I've had the pleasure of meeting people have different traits that are within themselves very particular, but that contribute to demonstrate something more deep, something more unique. And so at the same time, that define in a way that's convincing not only the personality of Don Giussani, I'd say something more, the strength of this charism, that through him, through his his capacity as an educator has transferred to many people that today lives from the same energy that communicates and in their way educates everyone that they meet and generate as natural non-biological children. But two recent events. What is the first one? Our friends who live in the territories struck by wars and destruction. One thing that really strikes me all the time is to see when we ourselves feel often with the means that we can, so video calls, and we can't see each other in person, seeing how in no moment the certainty of good hasn't diminished. It's clear that it hasn't been given by something, a reflection, a personal reflection. It doesn't come out of a philosophy. It doesn't come from a training. It comes from something that's so real, so concrete, an ideal that's so real and concrete that permits you to see what's in reality, even if it's so kind of destructed, but this seed of goodness that's within this destruction, it resists. And this you see in the way that they see each other and the friendship they have. It's the seed of the only seed, as Pope Leo said yesterday, as he said to our young people, the only seed that from which a hope of peace can be reborn. The other episode I've told many times recently, but just because it struck me so much, everyone understands that we all know the situation in these past few years in the state of Cuba. One of our friends, Alejandro, he's called, with which we call often. He has a great dignity. These are friends who live there. We have a community of around 30 people. They help each other every day with such a loyalty. They never ask anything from each other. It's me who insists to have news from them. It's also very hard to help them. What struck me is that they have a few hours a day of electricity, and they told me that he told me in a moment between ourselves that every week they do charity work, because for them it's a gesture, a fundamental gesture of how to show them how faith doesn't remain a sentiment, a subjective sentiment, a spiritual sentiment, and that's it. It doesn't. It's not just that. It's the sustain of the sustenance of life. And so this is because faith, as the title of this meeting says too, expresses itself as love in reality, love that's received from He who is the only source of love, He who is love. And so this gesture of charity for them is a point of loyalty and faith, absolute faith. They don't know when this hour of electricity will come with which they need to cook, charge their phone, their computer. Think of all the things that happen in your day, how much they depend from electricity. And so even this, even then, at the established hour, they go off and do charity work, and it's clear that this isn't explainable if not for the fact that for them, evidently, for those who live this experience, this is a nutrient even more indispensable than physical nutrition, more or less. And so I'd say, to kind of answer the question, that in the many aspects that emerge, I've only done a few examples, but there's 3 elements that I want to underline. The first, the thing that I can say a common factor in all these experiences, very different experiences, is that Christianity is a present event. It's not a doctrine that we can apply. It's not an organization that we can export. It's not even a model, because if it was a model, in Cuba it wouldn't work. Because it's an event that rehappens. It happens wherever there's a person that recognizes it. The second is the method. It's not a model to export. It's not a model to replicate. It's a method for sure. This charism, we could say, expresses itself as a method in front of reality, and it's a method of experience. Giussani's never asked anyone to believe for blind obedience in a rule. He always invited people to kind of ask themselves if it was true, and this verification of fact is a kind of indispensable for a risk that even Pope Leo recalled yesterday. And here, yesterday, we had a confirmation from Pope Leo himself that he gave the historic responsibility of keeping this risk, this educative risk, this method, a method that risks in reality. It doesn't fulfill itself, but through conservation of what's been given to us. This means, first and foremost, to live it. It's not a privilege for us, but it's a task for the whole world. And the third thing, to summarize, is that this method, this gaze on reality, generates people. It generates, we see it in these days at the meeting. Giussani defined friendship, as the Pope also said, as a company guided to destiny. And this seems the most fragile trait, even first and foremost today, but it's the most solid one.
Thank you. In an interview of yours a few months ago in Tracce, responding to a question, Don Ennio, you said that you were very struck by when you discovered that Don Giussani allowed himself to change the tense in the Angelus from the past tense to present tense, so that the word dwells among us rather than dwelt among us. So, what do you think about? You use this description in a homily in St. Ambrogio. So, I look at you all who are here present. There's many of us. It seems that the risk that we have ourselves, to say there's loads of us, we're good, we must do many things, but maybe we forget the most beautiful and true things. Christ, Jesus, is here. Maybe it's something that we have forgotten a bit. Christ is here, really present, alive amidst us. It seems that too many times, without realizing it, we've maybe theorized this and elevated it and spoke about Christ, but he's my companion. This brings to mind, when I thought about this, that the sister who I did catechism with when I was a child, who said that she taught us that when I was walking on the street, walking on the right, to stay a bit away from the wall of the buildings. And said if I was on the left, I should stay close to the wall. But why, sister, do you teach us this? Because you see, on the left, like this, that way the devil who's looking at will stay away. But on your right, you leave space for Jesus, and so this way you can let your guardian angel walk with you. So I don't know, you spouses. Is he at home with you? Does he live with you? To not come every now and again. The risk is I go to Mass. I went there to so and so, but Christ is there at home. In your home. Certainly in the mystery of the beauty of his discretion, but his reserve. You live him when you see your children, when you eat, your worries. He participates. How often we could say, if we think about it, certain things are resolved in a way that you don't understand how come, but certain intuitions that come. And that have happened by chance, or perhaps because he's there. He's seen us, he's heard us. He's heard our worries. He inspires you. He raises you up. The angel whispers into the ear. That's a beautiful phrase. So this inhabiting, this living with you. So it's a present that I think, and not every now and again, but not only if I go to Mass, not only when I pray, but always. It's also next to those who don't believe in him. How often do we, so that there's the phrase is very good, so think of certain grandparents who think of my grandchildren, they complain, maybe I did something wrong, these grandparents say. So he's next to your grandchild, Jesus is there, maybe crying. Maybe crying because he loves you, but he's there. In somebody's bed of suffering, he's there. In a moment of crisis, he's there. And so you can change, because if you recall that he's there, then you speak to him. It also changes your prayer, because it's not made of formulas. So formulae are a way up, but then you should be able to dialogue. And so you speak, you tell him what happens, the things that worry you, the good things that you managed to do, but he's there to say to you, don't fear, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's not the God who expects from you, but it's the God who says, I'm here with you, your love, your spouses, which has been blessed forever. That I like recalling the vows, and the present priest says, I absolve you, but two spouses say, I take this man, this woman, and he's the face of God, of Jesus. And he, above all, first straight away looks at her. It's like the face of Christ for him, incarnated in front of him. So this presence, which then obviously gives you courage, the courage to, when I started in the 50s, if you like, when Giussani did in the 50s, and then in 1968, and going back with the Montini in the religious sense. What was missing? What was going in the crisis? The religious sense. So it wasn't prayers. It was to give a sense, a meaning to your life, to your existence, and the meaning, the sense that you don't lose is Jesus. Someone who will never betray you. Someone who's always close to you because he is with you and in you. You're his image and likeness. So I'm no longer afraid. This then becomes his dwelling among us. He stays next to me. I can speak to him in any moment. I can entrust myself, but there's no difficulty. because it's too much for me because I have him next to me. Thank you. So Davide, 70 years ago when Don Giussani started his adventure, he was measured against the progressive loss of faith in the young people. Now we have the young people of Generation Z, the digital natives, many of whom Christ is unknown to them, that maybe he's a name that they've never even heard people say it. And so I ask you, is it still worthwhile today, the proposal, the road that Don Giussani has started 70 years ago?
Well, for sure, yes. The answer is yes. But, well, yesterday we had the example of a clear example of this. But I'll start from an example that regards these lands in Romagna. A student looked at a letter in their school where it says nothing gets explained to me with passion. In class, I only see death, dead eyes. You think of a tree that's alive, but you don't water it. I come from a place where no one sees me. It's not a complaint, it's a cry. And this is exactly the question that the guys in Tracce had when Giussani started everything, because the reason he started everything was because he realized that these young people talked about faith, talked about things that they felt, but it wasn't an experience. And so, because this isn't true that young people of today have less questions than the people who had the same age 70 years ago. In a sort of sense, they have them. They're more naked, these questions, because then they don't have the answers that were there easier back then, and made it easier for the young people back then to kind of frame these questions. This is why our problem might be our occasion. It's our occasion because when Giussani brought his young people around on expeditions, he didn't go and question them about Leopardi, the poet who changed his life. Like Don Ennio said earlier, he did the thing that he'd always done. He looked them in the eye and asked them, "Who are you? Where do you come from? Who makes you?" He didn't start from the presumption that they knew who Christ was. He started from the fact that they had a heart, and everyone has a heart, even those who spend 11 hours in front of a screen. And so, for me, the most insidious risk, if we want, of the digital age, isn't that cars think like us, machines think like us, but that we stop thinking. In front of instruments capable of giving immediate answers, apparently perfect answers, young people lose the flavor of asking themselves these questions, because in reality, the heart of those questions, the cry that they have inside of them, no algorithm can reply to that, can answer that, because no algorithm can have a heart, can cherish the destiny of these young people. And so, for this reason, Giussani's pathway still has its worth, but it has one condition: that there are some adults there. Because the problem aren't young people; it's the adults. We have something to propose that challenges their liberty. Or are we afraid of their questions for which we don't have an answer to? educating for Giussani was introducing to total reality. Because if it was only a transmission of notions, a machine could have done this very well, even better than ours. I see this when I need to prepare a lesson in university. But to communicate a hypothesis of significance requires a real relationship. It requires a presence in which the adult risks their own freedom in front of the freedom of the young person. And as we heard yesterday, in Europe, like in the United States, many young people are closening themselves once again to the church. The sign that there's a question that hasn't switched anyone off, but how this question, dramatic question, nests the desire to follow a hypothesis of significance. If the answer to this question is never found inside of presence, a real presence, then it will switch off just as quickly. So this is a task. It's responsibility that's just as we were told yesterday by the Pope. So the only thing that I permit to add is that for Giussani, this thing, the faith, first, even before a mystic or spiritual thirst, is a means of knowing. It's a means of knowing reality, and so it's a method of reason. And so this is what convinced so many of us to start to trust ourselves in a history when even we can't see the immediate end point of this thing.
Thank you. Shall we come to a close? Time is short. Here we have the president and the responsible of the beatification cause. If they take on the responsibility of continuing, we'll go ahead. It's up to you. I'm not taking responsibility for this. Yeah, we can do another. We'll do one more question. Okay. Very personal one, which I believe could be useful to many people. Giussani was proud of being an Ambrosian priest. You're a priest of the same diocese. Is there something that helps you, that made you feel influenced even from this, even if in an indirect way, that Don Giussani, the priest, has helped? Certainly there's the fact that the passion of his priesthood, his love for his priesthood, he was truly enthusiastic about being a priest, being an Ambrosian priest. We Ambrosians we're the most pushy priests in the world, I think. But having said this, why? Remains within time, but the time we've got. But I think 3 reasons. I think the first thing, first our formation, when Montini did his first pastoral letter, Christ is everything for us. And you wouldn't really understand that if you didn't have at his back this concept that Christ is everything for us, his life, his breath, his hope. So this centrality of Christ is the heart itself of Giussani's thought, which I think is typical of the formation, the Ambrosian formation in Milan. Second thing that I note is his passion for youth, for young people. Think of the fact that we were formed in the great oratories that went back to St. Charles Borromeo for meeting young people. This passion, the oratory was born as a way to be able to meet young people, to be able to attract them, to dialogue with them. The priest who was there with them, who came to speak with them, to dialogue with them, to speak the importance of young people, and so on. And so you can understand why, for a certain point, from the beauty of the seminary, he passed to go the famous the steps, I think they're the dirty steps of the Bochet. So to meet the young people. So I think they are the future. The civilization of the love will prevail. Third answer I could give is the optimism, his enthusiasm, hope, whichever word. So because Ambrosian formation, which brought us all the way back to Ambrose's rites, which have a few beautiful pages which describe the creation of the world. The seventh day is a beautiful page when God created man. And Ambrose says God rested because he had created the most splendid of his creatures, his masterwork, given intelligence that could know him, that had freedom so it could imitate him. Because in this reading, the passion for man. Who is man? Religious sense. Man is the masterpiece of God, the most beautiful thing, most splendid thing that God has created, gifted even with reason, with the possibility to imitate him. After having created him, God rested because he needed to rest, because he needed to regather his strength to forgive them, to pardon them. So man is a sinner, but he has this passion for him. So he never was worried even about inciting, dealing with sinners, with pessimists. I think this is also the future of Ciel, being able in this world where the sense of man, the meaning of man is lost, or everything is pessimist, man as the masterpiece of God, the supreme beauty that it created. Freedom is the greatest gift, and with intelligence that lets man know God and dialogue with him and to speak like God. This, in our formation, we can be very proud, is that I think Giussani, and I hope every Ambrosian priest will have this. Thank you. And I wish via all the bishops present that this continue. Davide, Don Giussani had a boundless esteem for human reason, and you work in one of the most advanced fields of scientific research, which is that of nanotechnology. How has Don Giussani influenced your use of reason in this activity, this risky activity?
So, well, in the meantime, I'd say that I start from a confession that it's not that I dreamt when I was little of being a nanotechnologist, because I mean it didn't exist back then, but even then I didn't think of being a scientist. I wasn't like Bersanelli, my friend who knew he already had his first telescope and looked at the stars in the sky. I found myself in this situation because in reality I wanted to be an engineer. Then when I did my A-levels, that summer I'd studied the whole year to do a pathway, a climb on the Cervino mountain, a very difficult way, and that summer was always bad weather. But the weather, the only 3 good days was the days for the test of access for engineering. I had no doubts. I left behind engineering and I went to climb the Cervino. And so after then I had to decide what to do, and I found myself being a chemist and then successively a biochemist, following kind of the signs that reality and gave me and the opportunities that were offered to me. I say opportunities because in reality there was the fact that when I graduated Giussani with a certain insistence, because this was another part of the character of ours that maybe hasn't really emerged, is the fact that he knew how to be really insistent when he thought that something was according to his important criteria. And so I had to stop in university, and I had to follow this path. And so kind of things went in this way, and my job is nanotechnology, which is an innovative technology which uses instruments of nanotechnology to look at particles, of really small particles, in kind of a thousandth of a millimeter wide, which get used to make therapies better and improve diagnosing of especially tumors, but also pathologies and other inflammations, things. The idea is to focalize the action only when it's needed, leaving unaltered where the therapy isn't needed. And so what does this have to do with the method of reason of Don Giussani? This, for me, is something that's, in reality, I found myself doing kind of when I was doing it. I had a lot of teachers from the point of view of the technical point of view, technological point of view, scientific point of view, but Giussani was certainly not only my leader in life, as I said earlier, but also a teacher in the respects of my job, and how to approach it, the method, because in the end, the true way of staying in front of reality accompanies you in every aspect of life. Then it's your responsibility to translate this into a way of that's adequate to the context. And so for me, I understood straight away that the nanomedicine was evidently the method, as Giussani always said, imposed by the method is imposed by the object. You can't, it's unthinkable to kind of tell the molecules what to do without accepting the laws that nature already imposes. You have to accept the reality. The molecule works with certain mechanisms that you have to learn. You can't impose on it. You have to have the patience to stay there with the method that's imposed to you by reality. And so this is certainly, it shows us that it's not me that establishes how a molecule acts or interacts with other things, but I have to learn this. And so this is an example to say that even in my field, a researcher has to understand immediately, because it's his day. You have to understand that there's a reality, a fact, a data that has to be questioned. So Giussani called this realism. And this, anyone who does our job and not only can verify this on the daily, because whoever defends the image of themselves as reality should be, can't be a scientist. Those who defend their own image against realities, in fact, is a ideologist wearing a lab coat. And so what did Giussani give me to conclude? He didn't give me a method of work, of lab. My teachers gave me this, but he kind of prevented me from reducing my reason to a certain measure. Because if it's reasonable, if only the thing that's measurable, that's reasonable, even science dies. Because science, for me, starts from one question, from which all other questions arise. Why? Why does something exist? Why does something exist instead of nothingness? And so why does the research of this interests me so much? Why does this interest me? Because for me, the thing that the response to these questions, I can verify it through my daily life, my personal life, not only on nanoparticles, but also when some years ago I was very gravely ill, and for weeks they didn't know what was wrong with me, and then it was revealed that I had a cancer. That then I was cured. Now I'm fine. I'm healthy. But even then, the method was the same. And I have to say, even then, my experience as a researcher helped me understand what I had that was wrong with me, but also in staying in front of this thing and facing it. So facing the fact of what was happening without any discounts. Accepting the fact isn't the hard part. It's really accepting it, not taking the easy way out. And to discover that this fact wasn't an incident on my life, on my responsibilities, on the things that I had to do. I have a family, children, already some responsibilities within CL. It wasn't an incident along the road. It was my road, my pathway. Thank you.
How beautiful it would be if for every sea that awaits us, every evil that awaits us, there was something for us, and someone, a father, a love, someone able to take us by hand and to find that river, a path here, amidst all of this silence, in this land which doesn't wish to speak. There's a clement and beautiful path, a path from here to the sea. This is the cry of Kafka, that's live in our days, by Alessandro Varico, Don Giussani, and we're here for this. This path, this road, he's marked it out. He's taken us by hand, and it's a path that's available to everyone. From an Ambrosian Monsignor, a scientist, from a young man who's ill with AIDS, who cursed God and died in a state of grace. There's everything necessary to be alive and joyful. A human company, as the Pope recalled to us yesterday, and I'll cite his words, a people that realizes that they belong only to God. Well, let's leave it with a couple of little notices that I must give to you. A little gift, little surprise that Davide, knowing the curator of the works of the publication of the texts of Don Giussani, he's allowed me to propose to you that a few minutes, brief anticipation of the new book of Don Giussani, which concludes our work on the 1968. It's coming out from Rizzoli in September. We're back in 1972, when Don Giussani is speaking to a group of responsibles of the newly born CL. Listen to how he speaks of this strange company that exists only because there's Christ, only because they belong to the one God, and that what task he assigns to this human company which for 2,000 years has reached our present. The Church, the Christian fact, is an event that's totally historical, with all the connotations of history, of a historical fact. An event that is the objective and goal of an encounter in the literal sense of the word, because you meet people, You meet things, you encounter things. For example, in an assembly, you encounter facts with a precise face. This is really it. The Christian fact reveals itself as an encounter with the event of Christ who strikes history, which is called the church. Made of faces, church, assembly, community. Made of faces of people, of men who have a certain temperament, who speak in a certain way, who have another one and speak in a different way, who have a certain type of intelligence and perceive certain things, who have a different type of intelligence and perceive different things, or don't perceive other things, who have a certain way of being, and so they are shadowy, gloomy, or joyful. They have a certain, I could say, a certain history, and so therefore a certain educative history, and so they are clumsy or less clumsy. They have a certain generosity of will, or they don't have a certain generosity of will, and thus they know how to risk all the way, or they don't know how to risk all the way. And so it's man, all told. For the Pharisee and for the scribe, Christ didn't have anything, none of the characteristics that makes him attractive and worthy of attention of a man. None. Okay? And think how the encounter today, how it depends exactly how, just like then, by this crumb of simplicity that is deep down in someone. Christ is, in history, the church. He is the church, Christ. That's what Christ is. Christ, in history, reveals himself. He makes himself present, makes himself a presence. He strikes with his presence time and space as church. His work of redemption is localized in the world as a sign. It has a sign, like we said already, a normal place. The road to Christ is the church. Because Christ is its head, inseparably connected to this in the plane of history. And it's from him that reaches the church to this channel that's dug in the crust of the earth, in the crust of history. And it's this that comes through this channel, the capacity for redemption. It's from this, through this, that comes the power to recreate. It's from this that we have the possibility to realize as perfection in a place and in a time of history. The Christian fact is made present only by the power of the Spirit, that is, by the power of Christ, who reveals himself today within as a norm, within this figure of history, this riverbed of history, which is the church. This company that's trustworthy, as the Pope said, as Cardinal Zuppi said, is in reach of everyone and is for everyone. All it needs is the simplicity of a yes to recognize, and that lets you be moved, be involved. I thank you. I forgot the title of the book, but it is The Center of Life. Subtitle, the fact of Christ and his his remaining. I thank above all Don Ennio and Davide for their testimonies. And all you for having taken part in this encounter, thanks to Tracce, which I have to say that with this meeting, Tracce has changed. It's changed its face with a new graphical layout, new multimedia content, which you'll be able to discover in the Tracce arena. Signing up to receive the newsletter, subscribing to the magazine, which hopes to be even more attractive, a representation of a life that doesn't stop, that's in the present, but is a promise also for the future. Last notice, which is necessary, as much as bread, is that each one of us can sustain the meeting, contributing to build it together. This place of encounters, beauty and hope. Along the Fiera, you'll see the Donna Ora points through which you can give a free offering. And given that the meeting is a foundation and a third sector entity, those who sustain the meeting can receive tax benefits in their tax declarations. Thank you. Oh, can I take advantage? I would have said it this morning, but it seemed to be the time. I also wanted to thank, in the name of everybody, above all from mine, and I'll say it really from my heart, Cardinal Zuppi, for having been with us all day, and also yesterday. Thank you, Cardinal.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
El Papa León XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di comunione e liberazione.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il programma Easy Token Collection, per accumulare punti da trasformare in premi. Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.
In mezzo al rumore serve qualcosa che duri.
El Papa León XIV.
Storie vere. Incontri che cambiano la vita. Persone che costruiscono. Uno sguardo originale su ciò che accade. Tutto questo è Tracce. Ora anche in una nuova versione digitale. Per raccontare sempre più storie di gente che vive. Tracce, la rivista internazionale di comunione e liberazione.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il programma Easy Token Collection, per accumulare punti da trasformare in premi. Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Consorzio La Cascina. Ristorazione, global service, costruzioni, servizi alla persona. Promuoviamo l'impresa mutualistica e il benessere della comunità. I numeri di una grande realtà. Oltre 650 milioni di fatturato, più di 16.000 lavoratori. Vivenda. Ristorazione per mense scolastiche, ospedali, aziende e comunità. Global Service. La Cascina Costruzioni. Realizziamo come impresa o general contractor infrastrutture e grandi opere edilizie. Medi Hospice. Assistenza, accoglienza, cura. Da sempre al fianco dei più fragili. Consorzio La Cascina. Cuore da cooperativa, testa da impresa.